Personal development was already challenging when it was just about me, but now Friedemann Schulz von Thun claims there is an entire inner team. Pretty big team, I suppose. I'll never get done. Actually, the model of the inner team is quite helpful for personal development, and today we'll find out how that works. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung, and today we'll discuss personal development using the inner team by Friedemann Schulz von Thun. Let's have a quick refresher of what that inner team is. Imagine I'm standing in the supermarket in front of the sweets. The connoisseur within me suggests, get that chocolate, it is excellent. But the one in me who is health conscious says, no, better get a salad, it's way more healthy. And there's also the one who is economical. He says, no, you two, we only buy what's on the shopping list. And all the time my inner manager is standing by with a big to-do list saying, guys, hurry up, we have other stuff to do later. According to Schulz von Thun, all those inner voices, thoughts, impulses are members of our inner team, and we have to be the team leader. We already discussed what this means for communication in specific situations in the first video, which I will link to in the video description. And today we will find out what it means for personal development. Here we need to modify and expand the metaphor a bit. Imagine an inner stage on which your inner team members are acting. And those team members who are on this inner stage, they are the ones who determine our communication, our self-presentation, who are visible to the outside world. But there is also an area behind the stage, where other members of the inner team are waiting for their parts, or where members of the inner team are located who are not allowed to go on stage. And there is even a dark cellar beneath the stage, more about that later. Now, who are those team members who get to be on the inner stage and be visible to the outside world? First, we have a main protagonist in each situation. Imagine, for example, you're having a nice evening with your friends and you have some friendly conversation and everything is relaxed. In such a situation, you probably place a team member on your inner stage who is an entertainer and friendly and who cares for a good atmosphere and happiness and whatever. But if you are in a stiff business meeting where everyone is wearing suit and tie and looking at the PowerPoint slides, you probably place someone on your inner stage who is cool and distant and professional and who cares about facts. Apart from the main protagonists, we also have regular players. Those are members of the inner team who are almost permanently on the inner stage and who determine our personality. For example, you might know somebody who is always happy, always in a good mood, who always has a friendly word and a smile for everybody. This person probably has a team member as a regular player who is happy, in a good mood and friendly to everybody. Those main protagonists and regular players have earned their place on this inner stage by being successful in the past. So often those are very good parts of ourselves, but not necessarily. It could be, for example, that we learned that we get the most attention and support from our friends if we are whiny and helpless, if we act as if we can't get anything done by ourselves. Or it might be that a superior noticed the easiest way to get attention and submission from his employees is to lose his temper and shout at them from time to time. If we think about personal development, our first impulse often is to polish up those protagonists and regular players to work on our self-presentation. And they are important, but the more interesting question is, what happened to the counterparts of those regular players and protagonists? Schulz von Thun calls them antipodes. So, for example, this person you might know who is always happy, always friendly. What happened to his inner team member who is able to show negative feelings, who is able to show sadness and frustration and anger, who is able to show weakness and vulnerability? Where did that one go? Often those antipodes end up in banishment. And Schulz von Thun describes different degrees of banishment. Banishment of the first degree is under the motto, this is, I'm like that too, and this is perfectly fine, but maybe I shouldn't show this in this specific situation. So here we are talking about antipodes that are actually recognized and valued by the team leader. But in certain situations you say, oh well, you better don't go on stage right now. And sometimes this can be a good decision, but sometimes it can also lead to problems. Imagine the following situation. You are having lunch with your colleagues and some friendly, easygoing conversation, and you've placed someone on your inner stage who cares about harmony, who wants to fit in, who tries to be nice and friendly to everybody. But then the conversation takes a turn for the worse. Maybe they start to talk badly about a colleague who isn't present. Maybe someone starts to show off his misogynic attitudes. Maybe someone starts to tell racist jokes. And within you, an inner team member speaks up who cares about integrity, who stands for your personal values and protects your personal values. And he says, oh, wait a moment. But you, as team leader, you say, oh, better don't go on stage. The other guy who cares for harmony, he is so successful at the moment. Better let him proceed. Stay back. And this lunch proceeds, and you are friendly with everybody, and things turn out nicely, but after it has concluded, you have a bad feeling. You think, oh, I should have said something. Now, a good approach to clear up such situations, such problems, is first to get to know this antipode, get to know this inner team member you didn't allow on stage. And we already discussed how you do that in the first video. To quickly sum it up, you give that team member a name, the protector of your personal values, for example. You phrase his key message in a short statement, such as, I stand for integrity and protect my personal values. And you might come up with a visualization such as imagining what this team member would look like as a person, or imagining a symbol that fits this inner team member. And then there is a short interview. You allow this antipode to hold a monologue. It is helpful to sit in a different chair, in a different position, or maybe to take a card with the name of that antipode into your hand, so you consciously make this transition, and then you try to talk from the perspective of that team member and describe what is important to him, what he cares about, what his wishes and his needs are, without any contradiction or criticism. Then you should do the same for his counterpart, for the one who cares about harmony in this example, who is allowed to be on stage. And also find out what he is about and why he doesn't want to let the other team member on stage. And then the second step is to find ways for those inner team members to cooperate, to really form a team and to combine their efforts. The idea is not to switch players, to have the protector of personal values go on stage and push away the harmonious one and say, all right, listen, you idiots, now I'll tell you something. The idea is that they combine their effort and they come to a result that works for both of them, where you still try to maintain harmony as much as possible while also protecting your personal values. How this actually looks depends on your personality. It might be that you say, I don't want to talk badly about other people behind their back, so I will skip this part of the conversation, something like that. Banishment of the second degree is under the motto, that's how I am, unfortunately, but I should not be like that. So here the opposition is not from the environment, from other people, but the opposition is also from the team leader and from other members of your inner team. For example, imagine a good friend has failed an important exam and you are full of pity and, oh, this poor person. But then you notice there is a member of your inner team who enjoys some Schadenfreude and actually is happy about it, who says, oh, things always took a turn for the worse for me, and this other guy always was successful, and it's good to see him fail one time. And then you think, but I'm a good friend. I must not have such thoughts. Or imagine a mother who is upset because her child is causing her so much problems and she thinks, oh, sometimes I could just throw this child out of the window. And then she thinks, oh no, what a sinister thought. I love my child. I must not have such a thought. Or a father who imagines going for cigarettes and never returning, and then he thinks, oh, what a dark and evil fantasy. I love my family. I must not have such a fantasy. At this point, you might wonder whether it is difficult, whether it is dangerous to deal with such antipodes. What if they come to the surface and break free? What if that mother actually ends up harming her child? According to Schulz von Thun, the danger of such a catastrophe occurring is most eminent if we continue the suppression, because then this suppressed parts of ourselves might break out at some point and a catastrophe might occur. And we reduce the risk of such a catastrophe if we learn to accept those parts of ourselves and to integrate those parts. A very important thing here and in general is to be able to endure ambiguity, to be able to say, I love my child, but sometimes it drives me crazy, and both are genuine feelings of myself. Schulz von Thun provides an example here of a young woman who has rented one of the rooms in her apartment to a friend, and she is very open and liberal and easygoing about it. Yeah, of course your girlfriend can stay for the night. Of course you can use the kitchen, everything easy. But then she notices she isn't really happy with the situation. She comes home in the evening tired, and those two are sitting in the kitchen, and she feels like her apartment is under siege and like there is no room left for herself. But she cannot accept these thoughts, because to her those are prissy and old-fashioned and narrow-minded thoughts, and she says, I am not like that. I don't want to be like that. And this puts her in a different position, in a difficult position, because she cannot have the situation continue as it is because she doesn't feel good about it. She can't get rid of the negative feelings. But on the other hand, she can't make a change because if she would act upon this prissy and narrow-minded feelings, she would feel very bad about herself. So here again, it is important to get to know this antipode, get to know this prissy part of herself and to integrate her. And in this case, it is especially important to find the good and valuable parts about this antipode. In this example, to understand that there are very real and genuine needs in play, such as having room for herself, having some peace and quiet, having privacy. So to really understand what this antipode is about, what his or her good sides are, and an important part of that is to give her a positive name. It's all right to start by calling her the prissy one, but once you get to know her, rename her, for example, call her the one who is protective of oneself or who is able to draw boundaries. I should note here that it is not easy to integrate an antipode who has suffered second-degree banishment. First of all, it is difficult to integrate a part of yourself that you felt very negative about and that you neglected and opposed before. And you might also encounter some resistance from your environment. Other people won't necessarily applaud your personal development, but they will be irritated and confused. For example, in the example of the young woman, if she suddenly starts setting boundaries for her lodger, the lodger will probably be irritated and confused. What has happened? Did I do something wrong? I merely did what you explicitly allowed me to do. Why is this suddenly wrong? Why are there suddenly boundaries I didn't have before? So he might be irritated and react in negative fashion. And what adds to that is that an antipode who has not been allowed onto the inner stage has very little training and experience in being on that stage. So he will be clumsy and awkward at the beginning. If this young woman sets boundaries and she has never done so before, she might lack diplomatic finesse at first and will be somewhat clumsy, and this will of course add to the negative reaction. And there will also be negative reactions within. Other team members will probably oppose this antipode at first, and it will take some time for them to accept the newcomer. There is an interesting variation of this topic that is called the inner adversary. This is actually discussed in another part of the book, so it's not discussed in the context of these different levels, different degrees of banishment, but I think it fits here nicely and helps to better understand the issue, so I will discuss it here. Inner adversary, this works like that. You have a voice within you that tells you, oh, this will go wrong, this will end badly, or this is all your fault. If you hadn't done this and that, everything would have turned out nicely. Or maybe you are no good, you will never achieve success, or something like this. It might not even be a specific voice, it might just be a feeling. And Schulz von Thun describes this as a member of the inner team who directly approaches the leader with the recurring and pushy message. And if this gets out of hand, it will be rather problematic. And this is interesting in this context, I think, because it kind of shows the other side of the issue. Because if you have some regular player and the counterpart, the antipode of this regular player is banished and disappears, then what will happen to that regular player who suddenly has no opposition anymore, no boundaries anymore, no counterpart who fights against him? This regular player will then turn into a negative exaggeration. For example, imagine you have within you an inner team member who focuses on performance, on achieving success, and so on, and he has a counterpart who cares for relaxation, recreation, taking breaks, taking things easily, and they have a nice balance. But in your attempts to be successful at work and having a great career, you more and more banish this team member who cares for relaxation and recreation. You brand him the lazy one and you banish him more and more until the performance-oriented one is left alone on stage. So he ends up without any boundaries, without any counterpart, and he turns into a stressful workaholic who doesn't allow for any breaks, who doesn't allow for any recreation, who permanently whispers to you, you need to try harder, you need to do better, you need to do more, you need to put more effort in. So, if a member of the inner team ends up in banishment, this concerns not just the member who is banished, the team member who is banished, but also the team member who is left without a counterpart. So what you need to do is, once again, to get to know this inner adversary, give him a name, note his message, create a visualization, and let him have his monologue. And again, it's important to work out the good and valuable part of this inner adversary, to understand the good function he originally had, to see the will to perform and put an effort in behind the stressful workaholic. And then it's important to bring his counterpart back from banishment and to strengthen his counterpart so you can re-establish an inner balance. It is important to understand that when dealing with the inner team, there is always an alternation and a balance between identification and disidentification. It's important to be able to say, this is a genuine part of me, and I accept this as a part of me, even if it is not that likable and that nice, and I didn't want to accept it before. This is a genuine part of me. But it's also important to be able to say, this is just a part of me. This is not all of me. This is not the whole of me. And I can draw a line here. I don't have to listen to this voice all the time. I don't have to follow up on this thought all the time. This is a part of me, but it is just a part of me. Those are very important, and to keep the balance between those. There is also third-degree banishment, but Schulz von Thun clearly states that communication psychology is at its limits here when dealing with problems that concern third-degree banishment. This requires actual therapy, because third-degree banishment is under the motto, that's not how I am. Here we are talking about inner team members, about parts of our personality that have been banished and suppressed to a degree that we aren't even aware anymore they exist. They have migrated to the dark cellar under the stage, where they are not seen anymore. But they still try to make themselves heard. They pick up a broomstick and knock against the ceiling. And Schulz von Thun says, a lot of the things we do in our daily lives are intended merely to create noise so we don't hear these knocking sounds. A lot of the things we do are meant just to create distraction so we don't have to face those parts of ourselves we don't want to recognize, we don't want to perceive. Those aren't necessarily evil and dark and anti-social parts of ourselves. This can also be parts of ourselves that are, for example, weak and vulnerable, that we banished because we deemed them unhelpful in achieving success and being liked and fitting in. For example, the often mentioned inner child might very well end up in banishment in order to allow us to function better in day-to-day life. Apart from knocking at the ceiling, what those antipodes in the dark cellar do is they form an underground movement. And this underground movement tries to take over our inner world more and more, which can lead to different problems. One example is when someone says, "Oh, I feel like I'm just putting up a facade all day, I'm just putting up a mask all day, and actually I don't feel anything, actually I'm empty within." This can be a result of such an underground movement. At the end, let me say a few words about the context. When we deal with personal development in general, and especially when we deal with the inner team, there is a balance or an opposition between two parts. On one hand, we have inner harmony. We strive for inner harmony. And on the other hand, we strive for outer competence. Inner harmony means that we are at peace with ourselves. For example, that we reintegrate those inner team members we had banished before, that we feel good about ourselves and are at peace with ourselves. But we also want outer competence. We want our relationships to work out nicely. We want to be successful at work. We want our friends to like us. We want to be popular. And for that, we sometimes can't show how we really are. Sometimes we have to place those team members on the inner stage of whom we know they are successful, they are liked and beloved, and other people react positively to them. So here we always have to strike a balance between ourselves and being who we need to be to fit in. This is also what Schulz von Thun is talking about when he says, good communication is true to ourselves and true to the situation. True to ourselves means we are authentic. We appear as who we really are. We don't put up a facade. We don't fake anything. We are who we really are. But being true to the situation means acting as the situation requires us to act, showing the behavior that is expected of us by other people, and fitting in and doing what needs to be done. So here again, we always need to strike a balance. We don't want to just act as the situation requires and totally neglect who we really are, because that would be faking and being manipulative and putting up a facade. But on the other hand, we don't just want to be who we are with total disregard for the situation, because this would be clumsy and rude and wouldn't work out either. So here again, we need to strike a balance. This is very important. By the way, my inner team members all agree it is a great idea to give the video a like, to write a comment, and to subscribe to the channel. At least we would all be quite happy about it. We will see each other again next week when we discuss the phase model of team building by Bruce Tuckman. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.